So to begin with, I'm going to go over the Reshape that Riot released. If you've already seen this or you're familiar with it, I'll leave a timestamp on screen that you can skip to. One of the biggest changes that happened to Kled was with his passive. At levels 1, 6, 11, and 16, he gets more auto attack damage versus champions than he did before, increasing as the game goes on. Skull health change, honestly, I haven't noticed a difference, so that's kind of irrelevant. The courage gained from minion last hits is now 5, which makes it a lot better for laning when you are just farming minions. You never get left on like 99 courage like you used to, which was very annoying. That doesn't happen anymore. You remount slightly faster as well. It's a lot better overall. Dismounted overall got slightly faster. You also get move speed at a slightly higher range. Overall, when running towards an opponent, you're pretty much the same speed. It's just when you're running away, you're slightly quicker than you were before, which is great for moving around the map if you happen to get demounted. The HP you remount with got a slight nerf. There's no more courage on takedowns. But now when you remount, you gain the health instantly, which is a major advantage when it comes to remounting. But the main thing here is Kled gains bonus armor and magic resist scaling with his bonus HP when he's demounted, and it increases by 20% for each nearby enemy champion. So if you have the whole enemy team there, this effect is essentially doubled. Along with the recent buffs that he got to this passive, this has become a massive help in remounting, especially in teamfights. It made Kled's teamfighting a lot better when you're building health items, that is anyways. The Q changes in short is AD scaling down, slow strength down, but slow duration way up. Your yank now consistently yanks at the same time every time. Calculating damage on the pool makes Conqueror a lot better, as well as Black Cleaver as well, especially. That allows you to stack these up while casting Q immediately, and also benefit from the stacks of Conqueror and the pen that Cleaver gives. So even though the damage numbers are nerfed, the Q definitely feels significantly stronger. No more Grievous, and the hitbox is a lot better. When it comes to the dismounted Q, similar story, AD ratio down, better hitbox, and also every projectile is considered a single target spell rather than AoE damage. This is important for one interaction in the game, but other than that, nothing much. Interaction I'm talking about is with Black Cleaver. As you can see here, doing one shotgun shot, landing every pellet, instantly applies 5 stacks of Black Cleaver. This is pretty useful in team fights if you're just pressing Q to get away and you hit some target you weren't actually hitting initially. Now on to one of the more significant reworks of his kit, the W. So what they've done is lowered the percent max HP AD ratio scaling and added a percent max health scaling to the percent max health damage that it does. So in short, building health equals damage on W. What they've also done is up the cooldown of W, but it now reduces its cooldown by 0.5 seconds when you hit anything and 1.5 seconds when you hit champions while it's on cooldown. Also a nice little quality of life. It now no longer gets consumed when hitting wards, but you can still kill them at rapid fast pace. This allows Kled to go for way longer extended all-ins because you get your W back, as well as also taking trades while your W's off cooldown. It significantly lowers his ability to be punished, in my experience. Now onto the E, pretty simple, just lowered bonus AD ratio, gave a little recast indicator range, which is nice little quality of life aspect to it, as well as a HUD indicator to show when it's timing out. Now onto the ultimate, it got its base damages increased significantly, however the scaling has gone down quite a bit. It's now converted to magic damage, and also it has a ping override similar to things like Galio. This is pretty important when you're thinking about building a pen item, because things like LDR, Mortal Reminder, won't actually apply on your ultimate since it's now magic damage. In my opinion, this makes Black Cleaver way up in priority because it doesn't have the downfalls that it used to have compared to the other pen items. And lastly, just a bunch of bug fixes. There's plenty of new bugs coming in that I've discovered as well. But key takeaways, Renata and Kled combo finally works since Renata's been released. I've been waiting for this to finally work, and it finally does, thank God. So to begin with runes, I think there's a pretty big variety. I've been experimenting with this rune page you see here. You can swap between Alacrity or Haste. Personally, most of the time I feel like I run Alacrity, but I have been experimenting with Haste. Additionally, these little small runes on the bottom right, You can swap between all three of these. I've been running this ability haste surprisingly recently, and it seems like it's pretty impactful, I'm not gonna lie. So I think that's just preference purely. However, I will say this haste build I find is really nice when you're rushing something like Titanic Hydra that has no haste on it, just to make up for the haste that you're lacking otherwise. More options for secondaries. You can run Sudden Impact Treasure Hunter. Personally, I think this is probably the worst option. However, there are some good matchups like Cassante, for example, where I find the true damage from Sudden Impact is really helpful. Also, if you don't know, when you're demounted and you use your Q, it instantly applies Sudden Impact, so it's pretty good in matchups where you want a heavy trade early on. Another option you have is Inspiration, Magical Footwear, Cosmic Insight. I find this is pretty good when you're taking TP. If you're in a matchup you can't really do much into, it's good to have the extra haste on your TP, you know. However, I don't take that very often. However, it is an option if you end up liking it, if you try it out. Saves you a bit of money on buying boots. Now into the main tree, which is Resolve. Demolish, Second Wind, still the GOAT. Just can't go wrong with Second Wind, honestly. I think it's a very great perk. However, a lot of the time I have been using this new Unflinching rune, since it has a base 10 of both resists, stacking with the resists you get in Kled Demount. I find it's really useful into those early volatile lanes where they have consistent CC to proc it on you. I think things like Set, Renekton, Riven, that sort of matchup. You can go Overgrowth or Conditioning. I've tried both of them. They seem pretty decent. Honestly, I just prefer the other ones. I don't think that the new health scaling has made me favor Overgrowth much more than Second Wind still. But overall, I think the most reliable skill tree would have to go to Sorcery Second with this Transcendence Gathering Storm page. And overall, Kled scaling did get a huge buff, so it makes more sense to me to run Gathering Storm. Other keystones you can run is press the attack as usual. If you're into an all squishy team, it's pretty good, as well as if you need the extra early damage. Fleet Footwork I do like to run sometimes if I'm into a really heavy poke matchup like Vayne top, maybe Gragas with Comet. Not that you know he's going to go Comet in advance, but yeah, you get what I mean. Also, I think Grasp has become a lot more viable. I like to run this into, again, early matchups that I need the extra damage in lane. Stuff like Jax, where it's like pretty hopeless later on. You're never going to be fighting him. It's a really good keystone to run into him. But just in general, it is pretty decent. I find it does make your 1v1 potential later on a lot harder when it comes to other bruisers running Conqueror. So I wouldn't really say it's the go-to every game, but it does feel a lot nicer than it did before, for sure. This is probably the page I'd run if I was to run it. I'd never skip out on having Last Stand. I think that's the most broken rune in the entire game, so... Obviously, you can swap out Overgrowth for Unflinching if you're in one of those matchups I mentioned earlier. With regards to your starting item, nothing's really changed. You can still go Longsword. You can still go Doran's Blade. I've probably been favoring Blade a little bit more because it has the HP and you do get a bit of extra damage scaling on your W. Not that it's massively significant, but yeah, obviously Doran's Shield into any annoying poke, like Vayne top, for example. And for first back, you want to pick up something like a Tiamat, Pickaxe, Phage, depending on what you're building into, which we'll get to in a minute. I think there's a much bigger variety when it comes to boot options. All these ones here I think are viable in some aspect. Defensive boots, obviously, the ones you want to go most of the time. Usually steel caps for your laner, unless they're AP, obviously, and Merc treads if the enemy team has a lot of CC and you plan on team fighting. If I'm against a tank and I decide I need the extra haste for whatever reason, haste boots are always a good choice. And Swifties is usually just for range top laners, or if my top laner is running Swifties, say for example I'm versing Singed, just to help me stay sticking on to them. Now onto the first item options. I think for the most part you want to be rushing either Black Cleaver or Titanic Hydra. Black Cleaver in general into any bruiser, any tank good option always. If they're not rushing hard defense, Titanic Hydra is a pretty good option early on as well, especially with that haste build that I was talking about earlier. Clips, you kind of want to avoid building items that don't give HP, but in certain matchups like your Fioras, not that I've versed any because that's what I turbo ban, things that do a lot of like max health percent damage or max health true damage, that you can't really be building a ton of health, or you have to kill quite quickly. Eclipse is pretty good into. Stride Breaker, just your typical build that you go into any range top laners, things like Jace, things like Vayne, Kale, for example. And Bork, you should generally try and avoid building. I don't think it's very great on Kled, but if you are into something like Scion or Cho'Gath, it's a pretty good first item because they have no choice but to stack HP, and it's strong into HP stacking. Now on to your 3-item core. I think by third item you should have Black Cleaver Titanic Overlords ideally. Overlords has recently become a must-have item by third or fourth on Kled. The sheer amount of AD this thing gives you is ridiculous. This is just a screenshot of one of my ranked games where I had Black Cleaver, Titanic Hydra, Sunfire Cape third, and bought Overlords, and this was the damage numbers mid-fight. It's absolutely ludicrous. Not having it is trolling in this new Kled build, in my opinion. Especially if you've gone for one of the builds without Eclipse and you're running 2, 3, 4 health items, 100% must buy item. So back to 2 separate cores. If you're going Black Cleaver or Titanic Hydra, third item should ideally be Overlord's Bloodmail. However, if you do need the resistances for whatever reason, you can slot in a defensive tank item here. I find it doesn't actually hurt your damage too much compared to how it used to. It's a lot more viable to be building tank items third item. However, you will at some point want that Overlords, ideally probably fourth item rather. However, if you went for Eclipse build, I think you should get Titanic Hydra third item rather than getting Overlords or Stride Breaker should you need that game, since you won't have a crazy amount of health to increase the passive by much anyways. Now moving on to some situational items. I have them in order here of how useful I think they are. So starting off with Steric's Gauge, don't really think of this as the shield. Think of it for the tenacity. If you're in a team fight and you need the tenacity, that's when you build this item. Obviously the shield is useful, but the tenacity is kind of what you build it for. Moving on to the tank items, Thornmail I think is your best tank item should they have a lot of healing. However, if they don't have the healing, then Sunfire is a great option. Also, I don't know how I forgot to add it, but right after Sunfire here should be Force of Nature. It's probably your best MR option, especially if they have magic damage that's DPS. Hollow Radiance, I usually build this into Jack's first item, while also building Steel Caps. I find it works well to keep me alive and also allow me to farm in a matchup that's otherwise unplayable. Knight's Vow is a pretty cheap armor option, so you don't have to invest too heavily. It's really good when you have a jungler or a mid laner that's very strong, or even ADC, but you need to check what your support's running. Obviously, you can't stack Knight's Vow on the same person, so put it on someone else if they're running it. I like to build this when I'm behind, or for whatever reason I need armor, but keeping a teammate alive is more valuable. Maybe I'm not the carry in that game. Pocket is a similar story. It's more so when you're team fighting a lot, and it's similar to Knight's Vow. Just make sure you're only building it in games where your support isn't also building it. So most of the time I'll be building this only if I have an enchanter support that's not running Locket, because having multiple Lockets diminishes the value that the shield gives. Sword is just another Grievous item should they not have a lot of auto attackers, so you can't really build Thornmail, or say they have someone like Swain for example who's unlikely to auto attack you, and you need to get Grievous on them for whatever reason. In games like that I'd usually hope my team can run it, but you know, it's there as an option. Personally, I've hardly, if ever, build Shojin. However, it is a pretty good item. I just find Black Cleaver just to be a slightly better Shojin, in my opinion. And after I've built Black Cleaver, I find building something like Titanic is just more valuable than what Shojin would give me. But it is a pretty solid item. Jack Show's a pretty solid tank item just in general. Really good for last item, for example. Gives a ton of stats. Also multiplies the resist you get while you're demounted. Hullbreaker I haven't been building too much personally. I find with W resetting on auto attacks, taking towers is way easier than it's ever been. I don't really feel like I need the damage from taking towers. And Titanic kind of seems to give more damage, or Black Cleaver, to me personally. However, it could be really great in lower elos where people are less likely to defend towers from you and that sort of thing. Edge of Night, hardly ever build it. It's really good into Vayne top, and that's pretty much about it. Blocks her E, stops her from knocking you back, and then you just face roll. Serpent's Fang is just that situational anti-shield item. If they have a lot of shield champs, they have a Lulu, maybe there's a set as well, Riven, etc. If your team can't build it, you can pick it up. It's always great. Sundered Sky, personally, I feel like is a bait. You tend to have a lot of damage lack when I build it. That's what I feel like anyways. However, if you are fed, it's pretty good. I've had some good plays with it, good games with it for sure. Overall, I wouldn't recommend building it too often. But I suppose it could be good into certain tank matchups, that sort of thing. Maybe Sundered Sky and after Black Cleaver, run those two items to help you deal with some tanks. But apart from that, I wouldn't really run it too often. Maw is a great magic resist option. Typically, I'll run Maw if I'm building it first item into matchups like Mordekaiser. It makes it really easy. Gwen, that sort of thing, like where you need magic resist straight out the bat. You can't delay till third item and then get a Force of Nature. Like, you need it straight away to help you survive lane. That's when I'll be picking it up. Otherwise, I'd usually just wait till later in the game and get a Force of Nature. But if you're against Mordekaiser, it pretty much guarantees that you get a remount in his ult, which is always nice. Now, Mercurial Scimitar, you rarely build this, to be honest, but sometimes you do get very annoyed with the amount of CC the enemy team has. So if you're in that sort of situation and you're good at clicking QSS quickly, it's always there as an option. Randuins, I'd like to go if they have 2 or more crit users. Maybe they have a Yasuo mid, or some random ADC top, for example. That's when I'd favor picking it up over some of the other tank items. It can also be pretty good into those ranged heroes because it does have the slow to help you get on them, especially in team fights. Kanik Rooken is like a burst, anti-burst MR option compared to Force of Nature. It's pretty good into stuff like Karthus, for example, just stops his ult from being annoying. But yeah, any burst-orientated AP champ is a lot better to get that rather than Force of Nature. Zeke's is pretty similar to Locket, just gives hybrid resists, only a small amount. The Tempest part of it activates after your ult actually ends or hits someone, which is nice. It helps with sticking power during team fights or even just ulting in the side lane. Although it's pretty niche, but some games it can be used for it. Guardian Angel, always good to protect your bounties if you get really fed. But yeah, nothing much else about it. Never build it into Caitlyn, that's for sure. You'll just get trapped in one shot afterwards. Unending Despair, while I haven't actually built this item yet, I imagine it's pretty good hybrid resist item overall. It does damage scaling with health, gives you a nice bit of healing. Yeah, it could be great when you need the hybrid resists, but I suppose you've already got a Jack Show, for example. You can go 2 tank items. I don't see the issue with that. But yeah, that's about it. Now, moving on to some example full builds. This is an example of a build I would go into high CC. So say I'm rushing, I choose to rush Titanic. Always going to pick up the Black Cleaver second. Merc Treads for the tenacity is always nice. And then third item, rather than going Blood Mail, I would opt to go into Sterix because that's around the time you'd be team fighting a lot. You get the extra tenacity from Sterix. You're stacking tenacity with boots and Sterix. It's very nice. Then, of course, fourth item into Blood Mail because you get ludicrous amounts of AD, as we covered earlier. And then just the Jack Show at the end to round it all off. Obviously, if the team's very heavily invested into AD, just build a defensive armor item like Thorn Mail or Randuin's and just focus their mage in the team fights, and vice versa, but Jack Show is just a placeholder here. But in general, Jack Show is a very good item to get later on into the game since it gives percent increase to resistances. So here's another example of a build I might go into a ranged top laner like Jace, for example, or Kayle. Obviously, we're going to be rushing the stride breaker to help me stay on them, as well as Swifties if they rush Swifties. Like Kale, for example, very often will be rushing Swifties, and you want to be able to punish her early on for her misplays and overextending. So you need to be the same speed, if not faster than her. So yeah, I'd be building that as well. As standard pen item, Black Cleaver, even against squishies, you're going to be shredding a lot of their armor. What's also really nice about having these two items is they both give 20 move speed on hit, so you're getting a total of 40 move speed on hit, or on ability as well. And yeah, just rounding it out with Overlords into tank item. Also, you could just add another tank item here as well at the end if you wanted to. It kind of depends on your game, but yeah, by that point you should know what you're missing. Here's an example of a team fight full build where I can't split push for whatever reason. Maybe I'm versing Aurelia, Jax, for example. Like you're never going to beat them in the side lane. All you're doing is collecting waves and then hoping you can fight with your team. Or even if you're just behind and can't beat your laner for whatever reason, maybe you're 0-2, you've gone down a bunch of kills, you're never going to beat like a Renekton, for example. Just building into this team fight heavy with Black Cleaver, Titanic, Sterix Gauge early for the tenacity, as well as the Merc Treads for tenacity, assuming they have CC in the team fight anyway, with the double support item with Knight's Vow on your jungle or your ADC or whoever's strongest at that point, as well as the Locket just to help your team in general. Allows you to be fairly tanky in the team fight while also helping out your allies as much as you can, because you're behind, you're not going to be doing crazy damage, so you know, it is what it is. And lastly, here's just a generic full build. Black Cleaver, Titanic, you know, you're running your steel caps as usual, your Overlords. I'll usually pick up a tank item by fourth item if I haven't got one already, and then, you know, Sterix last, or a second tank item depending on how the game's going, what you think you need. But yeah, that wraps up the updated guide. I highly recommend you check out my old guide. Although the runes and items parts of that guide is outdated, there's a lot of useful information there if you're interested. But other than that, thanks for watching. Have a good day.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind.